Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and as you can see, I threw this up quickly. It is not the way it's supposed to be, but I just had to do this and talk with you guys for about 30, 40, maybe 50 minutes um, because it seems like things are really spinning out of control and they're getting bad. So I just want to talk about this stuff. Hold on 1 second, please. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right, okay, here we go. So yeah, turn the lighting this way. You guys got to excuse me. I threw this up at the last second, last few minutes. Um, but anyway, um, I want everybody to just pause for a second, take a breather. Things are dovetailing; they're spinning out of control so quickly that it's unreal. I was looking at some of the Western politicians and how they were talking about that they're not a party to the war in Ukraine. And I was looking at how, at the same time, they're trying to strong arm Latin American nations, African nations, and Asian nations into making decisions that are against their own national interests and national security. They're threatening them, they're demonizing them, they're trying to bribe them, and even going so far as to provoke them. Okay, and I guess the politicians just don't get it. I guess they just don't get it. I, and what I'm talking about is when you start alienating people that you want to be your allies or people that you want to be a part of your movement or your policies and your policies directives, what you're doing, you're making enemies. Okay. And America has ruled, and the Western world has ruled so long that they believe that they still have the prerogative to talk to people any kind of way, to show, to do anything that they want to those people, right? And to, um, I would say, look down at them and even go so far as to threaten them with repercussions if they don't bow to imperial whims or imperial rules. This is America's mo. The Western world, as part of America's kingdom, do the same thing as they talk to other nations. As I was saying to you at the beginning of the show, before I got sidetracked because my daughter came here to move something around for me. Think about this. They continually antagonize their allies, their enemies, and those who they are trying to win on their side to push a policy initiative on other people. They continue to say that they're not a party to the war. They continue to say that they're not part of this war, even as they openly acknowledge training, arming, and giving intelligence to their proxies on the battlefield. They say that they're not a part of the war, even as they shoot an influx of money into onto the battlefield, while their uh, people and citizens at home are suffering. I want you to understand just how much contempt that has to be towards the people, the taxpayers of these countries of the West, and how they're constantly being called to bear a burden of imperialism and racism and fascism, right? Because this is what this is about, maintaining the so-called rules-based order. Now, I want to read something to you. I pulled this up right before the show started. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Okay, I think this is it. Make sure this is it. All right. All right. Here we are. Now let me go down to this. I just want you. Yeah, yeah. So look, this is what you put in rules-based international order. You don't have to put anything else in there with that. Just put in rules-based international order. Okay. And this is what it says. In international relations, the liberal international order, or LIO, also known as the rules-based international order, the RBIO. or the rules-based order, RBO, describes a set of global rule-based structured relationships based on political liberalism, economic liberalism, and liberal internationalism. And now, check this out. Now, when you scroll down, it says people who ask, and then it has a thing down there that says search for what? What is the difference between rules-based international order and international law? Now, I didn't even put that in, but that is on the same page, and it's like not even 2 paragraphs underneath what I just read to you all. Listen to what it says. What is the difference between rules-based international order and international law? This is very important and very telling. In short, the RBO, or rules-based order, makes no attempt to proclaim a legal order with defined rules and lawmaking and dispute settlement procedures. You heard me what I said? Now listen to the second part. The RBO, or the rules-based order, is something other than international law. It is an alternative regime outside the discipline of international law, which inevitably challenges and threatens international law. Why is that very important? Because you hear all of the Western delegates, all of the Western politicians, as they talk about this threat of Russia, this so-called or supposed threat posed by the Russian Federation, and this supposed threat posed by the Chinese nation, and this supposed threat of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They constantly trumpet that that China and Russia and these nations are trying to overthrow the rules-based order, right? Isn't that something? But we find out through the definition. This is on Google. Okay? This is on Google. You better get it. You better screenshot it. Put the keywords in and screenshot it, because Google will scrub the definitions. Okay? But it says, in short, the RBO, I have to say this again to you all, which is the rules-based order, makes no attempt. So they ain't even trying to hide it. They're not even trying to pretend anymore. To proclaim a legal order, meaning that their order is illegal. If they're not trying to make an attempt to present it as legal, what is it then? Huh? What is the opposite of legal? Illegal, right? It says to proclaim a legal order with defined rules and lawmaking and dispute settlement procedures. Stop right there. Why is that so important of this? Because it's telling you that the rules-based order does not try to settle disputes by international law or by a consensus of what is the norm or what is right. They make their own laws as they go, and they say, as we told you before on the show, do as I say, not as I do, and will determine whether or not you are in violation of the rules-based order, because we make the rules that's based on our order of things. This is in the definition. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm telling you exactly what's in the definition, okay? So let's go a little further. Now, I'm just reading this for the first time with you all. I pulled this up, and as I scroll, I said, I'm going to read this, but I didn't read it. I wanted to read it with you all, okay? So let's go further. It says, the RBO, or the rules-based order, is something other than international law. So if it's something other than international law, that makes it international law breaking, right? Or the antithesis to international law, which is outlaw. They make them outlaws because they're not within the law. They're acting outside of the law, which makes them bandits, thugs, dictators, tyrants, right? Pirates, and outlaws. Is that not right? According to the definition, this is what I'm saying to you. See, people can tell you whatever they want to tell you, but we're going to go by these definitions and we're going to apply them the right way, equally, okay? So that we can get a clear understanding of what's actually going on, okay? So bear with me. It says, it's an alternative. Whose alternative? Because it says it's an alternative regime. So whose alternative is it? Well, we know that the United States came up with this rules-based thing. We know that the UK comes up with it. We know that the European unions follow suit because why? Because now with emerging powers and emerging poles that's different from the once-based sole rule of the Western world, the international system that was set up when they were the dominant forces is no longer conducive to their colonial and domineering ways. So they have to make something outside of the law that they propagated for so long. That's why in their mind, with the cognitive dissonance, it was okay for them to depose Muammar Gaddafi, bomb that country in the Stone Age, and swipe it up under the rug with thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dead and hundreds of millions of dollars in assets stolen. That was not about territorial integrity and the sovereignty and the right of every nation to choose its own way of governance and its own path. But Ukraine is. Why? Because it's a proxy war that is supposedly to benefit America first and Europe second. So they use the rules-based order so that they can justify pillaging, robbing, raping, bombing, killing, destroying, and occupying. This is what's going on. We're reading the very definition of this stuff so that we can get a thorough understanding of the reality on the ground. Not what somebody's going to tell us, not somebody's opinion. We're looking at factual things, okay? So let's go further. It is an alternative regime outside the discipline of international law, which inevitably challenges and threatens international law. Now, if you in your local city, town, or municipality, if you're doing something outside of the law, and you're carrying out actions that may threaten the security of the people, right? And you're doing something to uproot and destabilize the law and those that enforce the law. What do they call you? An outlaw, right? A bandit, a terrorist, a thug, right? So the very definition tells us that America, Great Britain, France, Germany, and the European Union have been acting as thugs according to the definition of the rules-based international order. According to their definition, they are thugs, thieves, murderers, rapists, bandits. They are outlaws because they are trying to skirt outside of the law to do the things that are prohibited by the law. Right? Is that not right? Of course it's right. You know I'm telling you the truth. Let's go further. It says, it is an alternative regime outside the discipline. So it's undisciplined because it's outside of the discipline of the law. So it is an undisciplined, right, regime, not government, but regime that is trying to uproot international law and establish the rules-based order, which favors those who have pillaged, robbed, bombed, and made war against almost every nation and people on the planet, according to the definition. Rashid did not make anything up. I'm going to tell you how you can get to it. Again, I like to give the information so that you can see for yourself, because people will tell you anything. but you put in the keywords in the Google search engine, rules-based international order. And after you hit search or enter or whatever, it says about 2,410,000,000 results. Then it gives you an outline of what it's talking about from Wikipedia, so you'll understand. Then you scroll down past the thing that says people also ask. And right after that, it says the choice before us, international law or rules-based order, right? And the second choice, it says, what is the order of international relations? I believe that's what it says. Let me see. Let me scroll down and see. What is the order of international relations? All right. Let's see. Let me go back. And let's see. And so when you go down, you click on these different, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. And then it says, what is the difference between rules-based international order and international law? Hence, and it gives you the definitions. Just those keywords in the Google search engine. But you better do it before Google scrubs it. And you better screenshot it before you have no proof about this. So we find out that the international or the rules-based order is a outlawed regime trying to impose their model, their thoughts on everybody else in contradiction to international law. That's what they're doing. But to say it over and over again, see the propaganda machine of the West is unmatched. They can make you believe that it's day outside and it's 11:30 at night. All they have to do is keep saying it over and over and over and over and putting it in the newspaper, putting it on the television, putting it on the web. And before you know it, people with common sense who are normally rational in their thinking will start doubting. But you know what? Who's to say that 11 o'clock at night is nighttime? You'll start doing silly stuff like it because they play with your mind. But the reality of the situation is the rules-based order is an outlawed regime and an outlaw order that is trying to uproot and remove international law. And what's so crazy about this is the very nations who are trumpeting the so-called quote-unquote rules-based order were the very ones who started trumpeting so-called international law when it was beneficial to them. And now that you have growing poles of power outside of the Western world, and you see how they usurp the first it was all about the United Nations General Security Council, right? And when they could not get their way in the Security Council, Russia must be removed from the Security Council. I want you to think about that. The nations who have bombed more nations, robbed and colonized more nations, were saying that Russia had to be removed from the Security Council seat because of the war in Ukraine, not because of the French genocide in Mali, all right? Not because of America using Agent Orange and all that stuff in Vietnam, right? But because Russia is fighting an existential battle on its border. I want you to think about that. So when they couldn't get their way in the UN Security Council, guess what they did? They usurped authority. Remember, all of the African nations, all of the Asian nations, and all of the Latin American nations were screaming, listen, the United Nations Security Council does not represent the population of the planet Earth. We need more permanent members. How is it that France, the UK, the US, and Russia, well, we won't even put Russia in there, but we'll just put these, it's 5 permanent members, 3 of them. The UK, France, and the United States have been waging wars all across the planet. And they are represented 3 seats. No seats are represented by Africa. which has 1.2 to 1.5 billion people. Latin America, which has between 600 million and 900 million people. China alone has 1.5 billion people. Asia comprises of over 3 billion people, and they have one seat. But when this was no longer conducive to the colonial nations, they usurped the authority. Then they passed a decree using the General Assembly, the very assembly that wanted to be heard more than the Security Council. But the United Nations, the United States, the UK, and France were against it. And when they needed it, they turned around and strong-armed those nations into voting in favor of a resolution by the West. Isn't that something? The hypocrisy of these people. And I'll see you in the chat. I'm going to come to you in a second. Okay? Isn't that something? I'm telling you, the arrogance of these people is so astonishing that when you sit down and you break down this stuff and you look at it for what it really is, not for what you want it to be, and not for what you think it is, but for what it really is. It is mind-boggling. Okay? So you have a continent. I want you to think about this, people. You have a continent, and we'll classify America as part of that because she's the leader of the Western world. You have a continent that does not even comprise 11% of the population of the planet Earth. Has 3 permanent members in the Security Council. Where's the justice for that? Where's the equality and the fairness for that? And a continent that has between 1.2 and 1.5 billion people on the continent doesn't have one seat. Or a continent that has 900 million doesn't have one seat. Or the continent that has over 3 billion people has only one seat. How is that just? And how is that representative of the population of the planet Earth? Do you understand? The rules-based order is racist as hell, and nobody wants to say that. But I'll say it. I don't care. I don't care if you unsubscribe. I don't care if you dislike the show. I don't care, because truth brings with it its own vindication and its own merits. And those who like to hear the truth will welcome it. Okay? Now, again, the West continues to say that we're not a party to the war, but I want to see something. Let me go to something right here. Listen to this. This comes out roughly about 20 minutes to an hour ago. And this is on RT.com, and the title of the article is, U.S. has been preparing Ukrainian offensive for months. Listen to this. I want you to understand what that just said. This is from the war hawk, Victoria Nuland. Remember, her husband is Kagan, the dude that's over the think tank and one of the founding members of the Project for the New American Century, and those war hawks. That's her husband, for those of you who don't know. So she has roots over in those areas like Romania and those former those Caucasus or those European nations that are close to Russia. Her roots are there, just like Hillary Rodham is from over there. Hillary Clinton. All of these people have a connection over there, and they hate Russia with a intensity that's something else. They also believe that it is their inherent right to dominate the planet at all costs, even at the cost of killing everybody. That is their model. That is their motto. That is their thought. Okay? But this article here is titled, U.S. has been preparing Ukrainian offensive for months. Well, I thought the United States says that they were not a party to the war. Now, before we read the article, you know I'm the king of analogies, so let me give you an analogy, okay? So that you can ponder over as we read part of this. And this will be my first time reading the article too. I saw it as I was talking to you guys. So, say for instance, And let me see who's in the chat real quick. Let me, and this will make it even better. Let me go here and go to the chat real quick. Okay, Astral Atmosphere, Butthole is here. Pedro is here. All right, Pedro, appreciate that too. Okay. Now Astral Atmosphere is in the chat. Now, check this out. Say, for instance, he is planning on robbing a bank to steal $30 million. But he continues to, he doesn't have the wherewithal to do it. I'm scoping the bank out every day, right? I'm writing down and giving him what they call actionable intelligence on the bank, all right? And I'm grooming him to rob the bank, and I'm arming him. I'm training him. I'm telling him what to look for and what to look out for. I give him a map of the bank, even parts of the bank that are not known to the average person, all right? And then I give him the go-ahead to do it with the plans that I drew up. But he gets caught. Do I have plausible deniability? When they interrogate him and they find out where he got the intelligence from, where he got the plans from, who trained him, who financed him, who armed him, what do they call that? Aiding and abetting, right? So they will come and pick me up and say that I'm a party to the bank robbery, right? I have no plausible deniability. So if America, as the article says, the U.S. has been preparing Ukrainian counteroffensive for months, this means that the United States is the one running the show. So she no longer has plausible deniability because Victoria Nuland, the Undersecretary of State, has openly said it. Is that not right? So let's look at what the article says. The maiden midwife, the one who said F the European Union. You remember when she said that? When they were talking about being concerned, the European Union being concerned over what was going on when America pushed that coup in Ukraine. And she said F the EU. And talked about how the United States had pumped in $5 billion to overthrow the democratically elected President Yanukovych. Remember that? This is the same woman. She's an underling to Hillary Clinton. And these people skate through successive administrations. So the president may go. The Secretary of State may go. The Secretary of Treasury may go. And the War Secretary may go. But these people who are embedded in these think tanks and embedded in these parts of government, they really control the policies. So listen to what it said. The maiden wife confirmed Washington's role in the conflict at the Kyiv Security Forum. What? Let's go further. The U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, told an audience in Kyiv on Thursday that Washington had been helping plan the Ukrainian counteroffensive against Russia for almost half a year. So where's your plausible deniability of not being a party to the conflict? Listen to me. I am not advocating violence. I am not advocating war. But I'm giving you examples of what if Russia had been arming the cocaine boys that come up through Mexico, and I'm not saying they're Mexican. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, okay? So don't. Oh, he's talking about, no, I'm saying they come up through Mexico. What if Russia had been arming and training them and publicly stated in one of their conferences, oh yeah, we've armed and trained them. We're helping them. They're going to have an offensive in Texas to take part of Texas. What would America's response be? And if her response was to react forcefully, how can you expect Russia not to do the same? I'm asking you these things. I'm using common sense because common sense is not so common in today's world. Let's go further, okay? And then I'll be back in the chat in a few minutes, okay? So guys, continue to chat in the chat, and I'm going to scroll down. When one of the clips come up, I'm going to scroll down, and then I'll engage with you all. You know I love to engage with the chat. So listen, and I'll even highlight some of your comments if you want me to. So continue to bear with me, because this stuff, and I hated to do the show because I know I have to end it shortly because I have to go pick my daughter up. So, but I wanted to get on here and talk to you because I told you yesterday that I was going to come on live, and I didn't want to lie to you all. Okay. But let's go further. It says, even, and this is a quote, even as you plan for the counteroffensive, which we have been working on with you for some 4 to 5 months, we are already beginning our discussion with the Ukrainian government and with friends in Kyiv, both on the civilian side and on the military side, about Ukraine's long-term future, Nuland told the Kyiv Security Forum via video link from the State Department. She openly admitted that they are party to the war. So under international law, Russia has the right to strike everybody that is a party to the war. This is what I'm telling you. I'm not saying that she should. I'm saying according to international law, she has the right to. And she is justified under international law to take those actions. Okay? See, nobody addresses this stuff, but we do. And I know they're going to unsubscribe some more people from my channel. And I know that they'll demonetize or maybe even suspend me or give me a strike. But I have to tell you these things because nobody else is saying it. And I don't, to be honest with you, I really don't care if they do it. You know, I hope they don't. That's why I'm very careful with my words, or I'll be wide open. You think I'm wide open now. If they didn't have all of these restrictions, oh man, you guys hadn't seen none yet. But listen, it says she added that the attack will be likely starting and moving concurrently. So she's talking about an attack. Now, why is it that if you attack NATO or a NATO nation, NATO has the right to respond? As if nobody else has the right to do that. This is what I'm telling you. The exceptionalism, the cognitive dissonance. We can attack you, but you are not justified in attacking us. But if we attacked you, you can't hit us back, or you can't attack us. This is why they are so hell-bent on pushing the so-called rules-based order, because it is a international system that is based on their order, their dictates, and their thoughts. And if you act outside of it, you become a bandit, outlaw. I want you to think of this before we go further. America was in Afghanistan, right? For 21 years, 21 years, long years. And America has been in Iraq for well over a decade plus, right? America's in Syria, has been in there for a while, right? She's in Somalia. She's in Chad. She's in Mali. She's in Djibouti. She's in Ethiopia, right? She's in all of these places and then some, right? And when the citizens lash out at her presence because they don't want them there, America terms them as terrorists or insurgents. Think about that. America is not lawfully there, but she terms the lawful inhabitants who are doing what nature would put in them. If you occupy my house, if you're pillaging my resources, if you're accidentally or on purpose, if you're killing my neighbors and my family and my friends, I have the right to react. And when I react, you label me a terrorist or an insurgent. Isn't that something? But your illegal presence and your illegal war machines and your illegal occupation does not deem you worthy of wearing the tag of pariah state or insurgent or terrorist. Though you're bringing the bombs now and the military equipment, you're not the terrorists. Though you're funding instability, you're not the terrorists. But I'm defending my homeland and our resources and my people, and I'm a terrorist and I'm an insurgent. Make that make sense. And it only makes sense in the bizarro mind of the empire in the West. Because if you look what Great Britain did, or is accused of doing, of helping to orchestrate the attack on the bridge in Russia. Now, what if Russia did that to the UK? How would they respond? Well, they couldn't respond militarily because they don't have the military to do it, but they would use the whole entire backing of the United States and NATO to try to pressure Russia or even try to go to war with Russia. But they, in their mind, they're justified using every means at their disposal to cower Russia, to force Russia to bow down. And if Russia reacts, Russia is aggressive. Think about this. I bet you didn't know this. Right now, on the Korean Peninsula, right now as we speak, the United States is carrying out some of the most aggressive live fire war games close to the North Korean border. Not one Western media website is reporting on it and saying that America is carrying out aggressive actions on the Korean Peninsula. Not one of them. That's thousands of miles away from California. That's thousands of miles away from New York and from Virginia and from Florida and from Texas. And if North Korea responds with a showing of force, it is belligerent Kim Jong-un in North Korea. You see, in the mind of the West, every action that they take is justified. But when you respond, it is unjust. Russia responded to the firing of weaponry on civilians in the Donbass since 2014. Russia responded to the UK even openly building some of you don't even know this. When Russia went into the Ukraine and they started striking, before they sent troops in, they started striking strategic areas here, all across Ukraine. One of the areas that they struck was a area on the Sea of Azov, the sea that was once shared by Russia and Ukraine. The UK was building a naval base there. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you that. NATO had military centers all across the Donbass. They don't tell you that. So when they present this before the public, they say, oh, nothing could justify Russia's aggression. Try putting a North Korean base in Mexico, or Ukraine, or Iranian base in Canada. Or try Russia building a naval facility in the Gulf of Mexico between Texas and Mexico, and see what America's reaction would be. Remember, what's good for the goose, it has to be good for the gander, right? If we're talking about fairness, if we're talking about equality, if we're talking about justice, is that not right? Man, I'm telling you. And they want you to be crazy because they continue to try to dumb you down in the midst of the war, the world spiraling towards war. Now, I want to play something for you. Let's go back to something here. I want you to listen to this real quick. This is a clip on Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. And I want you to understand something. I'm not pro this, or I'm pro truth. Okay? And I'm anti-lies and propaganda. So, to be honest with you, the situation does not directly affect me at this moment, but I know that the vibrations And the waves from this will affect everybody on the planet. That's why I'm talking about Ukraine, and that's why I'm talking about the occupation of African nations and the occupation of Latin American nations, like the UK still is occupying the Malvinas Islands, calling it the Falkland Islands. How the hell can you lay claim to that island that sits thousands of miles away from Europe? But in your mind, cognitive dissonance, you can justify that because you occupied it and you think that because it was brought under your subjection, that it's yours. The same with the French occupying Pacific Islands and African Islands. Do you know that right now, and before I go into, do you know right now, the UN voted in favor of Britain returning, I forget the name of the island. They had taken the people from a Pacific island and put them off the island. They put them off the island, a lot of them, so that the United States and Great Britain could use that island as a intelligence base and as a military base. You know, and the UN voted to return those people, and Britain has yet to do it in contravention of international law. The same laws that once trumpeted. Or how France is occupying African territory that sits in the Indian Ocean, and talking about that's European, that's a European territory. Cognitive dissonance. And not one Western media platform is outraged or saying anything about this. But I have to bring this to your attention to let you know that when they're screaming about the territorial integrity of Ukraine, they are violating the very territorial integrity of Latin American nations, Middle Eastern nations, African nations, Asian nations, and even European nations' sovereignty. The hypocrisy of the West. And listen, before I go play the clip, let me tell you something. This is for the Muslims who listen. And this is for the Christians who listen. And this is for the Jews who listen. And this is for every other religious denomination that listens or who will listen. There is something called justice, karma, or as thou hast done, so shall it be done unto thee. The problem with the West, you have to get this in your mind. The reason the West continues to be outlaws and ride roughshod is because they believe that they are the exception to the very laws that God laid at the base of the creation of the universe. There's no way that you can say you fear God and go across the planet displacing millions of people, dropping bombs everywhere, exploiting the resources. Because if you believed in the God, you would think that there's a day of judgment that God would have to get retribution against you. But when you become so inebriated on the power that you once had and the kingdom that you once had under your rule, you disregard God and his rules, and you start believing that you are the exception to the very laws of nature. And look what's going on about how they continue to go around the world being aggressive. And when the people say, stop it, I'm not going to take this no more. You're not going to come in this area and tell me what to do and put your military bases and your weapons and warplanes and gunships. None of that says peace ships, peace guns, and none of that. Warships, warplanes, and war armaments on my border or next to me without a fight. Then those people become, in the Western media, aggressive and belligerent. Not the aggressive, belligerent moves of the West. They don't report that. They report the after effects of the reaction to the aggressiveness of the West. And they call the people who are the victims the aggressor, and they call the aggressors the victim. But I want you to listen to what President Vladimir Putin was talking about, okay? I have a few more minutes with you all. I'm going to try to play 2 clips for you all. And then I'm going to shut it down. I might do a vampire stream if I get a chance to, but I got to go across town and get my daughter shortly. So I want you to listen to this closely.
Все, кто поступает Everyone who thinks or acts otherwise brings damage to the world economy. They're shooting themselves in the foot and in the feet of those who have to obey their dictates. And by doing so, they also increase negative trends, hampering their own progress. This is what international experts are writing about, including those from the United States. By pursuing such an economic policy, they strengthen the downward trend of their economic development, again shooting their own foot. Well, that is their choice.
It's all about building on the mechanisms to achieve a fully functional multipolar world here. So discussions really are centering around that and how to improve transport and logistics in greater Eurasia, monetary and also financial mechanisms, how to settle in new forms of settlements in mutual trade and how to build and expand on that. Now, thousands are taking part in this two-day forum, which brings together government agencies, organized international organizations, media from over 50 countries, and they will be discussing just that, how to achieve multipolarity. We've already heard from the heads of most member states and even from China. Now, all this on the backdrop now as Russia's prime minister is currently in Beijing, where, as we know, he signed a number of agreements and has said that bilateral ties between Russia and China are now at an unprecedented high. And this is a sentiment echoed here as well via a video message that was sent by the Chinese president, where he solidified his commitment and the partnership between China and the Eurasian Economic Union. Let's take a listen.
Under the framework of the state visit to Russia in March, President Putin and I sealed new agreements on connecting the Belt and Road Initiative with the Eurasian Economic Union. The Chinese side is sincerely interested in the deepening and specializing of this field. We are ready to join efforts and strengthen interaction in the interests of new prospects for cooperation on the Eurasian continent.
This will entirely transform the international economic playing field. And Vladimir Putin did stress that there is a need, and we're seeing that from various partners, and that in fact the majority of players in the global arena agree with Russia that there is a need for a more fair, more balanced architecture of economic relations. Let's take a listen.
There are fundamental changes in the international financial system, and Russia is able to adapt, but also to become one of the leaders of this process. We are aiming to reduce the share of unfriendly states' currencies in mutual payments even more. We tend to work more actively with Eurasian Union partners to reach a complete transition to national currencies. This also takes place in other rapidly emerging economies around the globe, including China, India, Latin America. And it is important to coordinate joint efforts to establish a new, decentralized global financial system. This decentralization depends on the resilience of all global finances. The more decentralized it is, the more advantageous it will be for the global economy, because it will rely less on crises in the countries which benefit from a global reserve currency. It will make the economy more depoliticized.
So while the West is focused on trying to curtail cooperation with Russia and trying to convince other countries from not doing business with Russia, it's not going to plan. And Russia is in fact building on existing partnerships and developing new ones successfully.
So let me get through some of the comments real quick, and then I'm going to play the last clip, and then I got to bounce. And just, hey, and everybody, please hit the like button. And if you would, tell me what would be a good time to do the show during, is it morning or evening or late in the evening? I'm on Central Time, so you guys tell me what would be a good time for you all, and I'll take that in consideration when I'm doing the shows, okay? That way, if you don't get the notification button, I'll try to start setting up something like we'll have that, okay? I really appreciate each and every one of you guys being here. So listen, Pedro says, what about the U.S. Air Force tender asking for Russian Caucasian synovial fluid, race-based weapons? We'll talk about something like that on one of the upcoming shows, especially about these biolabs all across the globe and stuff. And I want you to remember what you just wrote here and put it back when we start talking about this so that we can address that even more, okay? I don't want to address it in a little short time. I want to give it the attention that it needs. Chris H. says that Red Pill Diaries, Diego Garcia is the base that you're talking about. Boom. Thank you, buddy. Thank you. Thank you so much. See, we learn from each other, and it slipped my mind, but it didn't slip his, and he shared it with me. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Astral Atmosphere says video keeps jumping. It's not me. It's not me. It has to be one of the two, either the Tube. I won't say the first one, but either the Tube or StreamYard. Okay, and it's crazy because I have a subscription where I pay money. So I don't have a free thing. I do it where I pay money, where I'm supposed to have better quality and stuff like that, and it never happens like that. But let's go further. Butthole. It says apparently they announced that they may give it up because they can no longer afford to keep it open. Well, you know, it's going to be more of that coming. It's going to be more of that. None your business. None your business. Ignorance is not knowing. Ignorance is knowing what ain't so. Mark Twain, app quote. Now let's go back to this clip I want to share with you all. Okay, this shows you how people are challenging the rationale of the West and how the rules-based order is collapsing before our eyes. And I think the three best foreign ministers on the globe right now is Sergei Lavrov, Wang Yi, who is no longer the foreign minister, but he is over the foreign ministry affairs and everything. He's over the foreign minister in China. And I think the South African foreign minister, who is a lady, I think those three are the sharpest three foreign ministers by far in the diplomatic circle across the globe. But I want you to listen to what they're saying and how they're questioning the U.S.
Is that responsible? That is the most responsible thing to do. Do you want me to fold my hands? Do you want me to not do anything? What will history say about me?
Hi there. So now, nowadays, you come across these interviews by African leaders being asked, tough questions, and the intelligent answers that they are giving nowadays are actually very interesting. Now, in this next part, I'm going to show you a part of an interview between BBC Hard Talk presenter or host and South Africa's economic freedom fighter leader, Julius Malema, about the support South Africa is allegedly giving Russia. So he gave his 2 cents, and I want you to listen to this. And after that, I also want you to listen to what the foreign minister from South Africa had said about the same thing.
South Africa right now calls itself non-aligned.
In the context of the war, but these are two different things. South Africa is an ally of Russia. Now, the second question is, where does South Africa stand on the war? It says I'm a non-aligned in relation to war, but Russia remains South Africa's friend. So we cannot create confusion around there. Don't create an impression that it is Malema who's going to come and create an alliance with Russia.
But there are some very specific...
Actually, I will
go
go beyond that. I will go beyond the friendship with Russia, and in the war, I will align with Russia, and I will even supply the weapons to Russia. Because Russia is in a war with imperialism, and any agenda that seeks to push back imperialist agendas, it's well within the policies of the EFF.
I think this notion of international rules is very comfortable for some people to use when it suits them, but they don't believe in international rules when it doesn't suit them, because they don't apply international rules or law equally in all circumstances. So you can't say because Ukraine has been invaded that suddenly sovereignty is important, but it was never important for Palestine. It's very peculiar. If you believe in international law truly, then wherever sovereignty is infringed, it must apply. And this is the point we've been making, that we use the framework of international law unequally, depending on who is affected. And we are arguing that that must change. And one of the interesting changes that has occurred is the sudden movement, because Russia has invaded Ukraine, that we say, okay, let's not allow the Security Council to just have the veto and let it pass. We take it to the General Assembly. When some of us had been calling for the General Assembly to have a greater say, we never enjoyed support. But suddenly today, see, that's where international law begins to mean nothing. Because for some, we see it as a cheating, and for others, we see it as a benefit. So our argument is, let's revise the international multilateral system to ensure that we observe that post-1948 has arrived.
What is the revision that you're looking for?
Well, it should be more representative, more democratic. If we retain the Security Council, regions that are not represented there must have a space. And I think the move for the General Assembly to have a greater say is an important one. And it should be for everybody, not one country. So already the signs are there. Let's really ensure that we make these changes, which several countries have been calling for many, many years. We're now 54 independent African countries that are members of the African Union. We have 3 rotating non-permanent members that are elected every few years to the Security Council. I mean, what is that? So I really think we've got to rethink the multilateral system, ensure it's more fair, more open, transparent, and democratic.
Yes.
I'm going to address a couple comments and then we're going to close out. I'm really pushing it. Now, I'm going to play that clip tomorrow on the next show that we do, because we're going to do a show tomorrow. We are going to do it, God willingly. If the weather suits, if it's not like storming and God willingly, you know, we always have to put God first. Things align. We're going to do a show tomorrow. We're going to jump off with this clip here, because there's a lot of things in there that I want to unpack. Now, I want to go to the chat one more time. Let's see. I'm going to read something in the chat. Okay, right here. Chris H. Excuse me. Chris H says, one thing few are covering is Cop City in Atlanta. The protesters are being charged for domestic terrorism for protesting it, and major corporations like Chick-fil-A and Home Depot are funding it. Hey, how about this, Chris? How about when we do the show tomorrow, and if you're able to attend, you bring this comment back up, and we're in, because this is something that we need to talk about, because that's about the empire eating itself up, and we need to address this. How about you put this comment back in the chat, and we'll highlight it, and we'll have more time to really talk about it. When y'all give me good points like this, I hate to brush over them and stuff, because they need a lot of time to talk over them, you know. And I thank you. I thank all of you guys for these chats, for these comments and stuff, because I really need it. I see Pedro in the chat, and I see what you said about neuroscientist Kevin McCorn. I think that's his name. I'll try to get some information on him and reach out to him and see if he would be willing to come on the show and talk about some of this stuff. I'll do a little research on him, and I really appreciate everybody. Listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining me on another edition of the most powerful platform for truth on YouTube and bar none on the web anywhere. You know it is. Everybody knows this is the most powerful, most informative platform, bar none. I want to let each and every one of you know that I love you. But remember that God, the true and living God, he will always love you best. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true. And hey, check this out. Be looking out for the show tomorrow, okay? So be strong, be true, but above all things, stay righteous. And you know I got to say my parting words. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. I love you so much. I want the whole world to know that I love my mama. Everybody, I love you if you love the truth. Peace out. Deuces.